Okay, now, I actually missed the introduction that this guy gave, and I was sure there was some nefarious remarks in there, no doubt. As it turns out, we sort of both grew up together gill netting for Ward's Cove in Kenai, Alaska, and there was always some kind of shenanigans going on. That was just the best part of the whole thing for us. At any rate, this is my dear friend, Don Pugh. Please make him welcome.
I love that word, shenanigans. Don't want to get into it. I am not a poet, but we're encouraged, those of us who don't do poetry, to try one in the spirit of Fisher Poet. So I tried one. I want you guys to bear with me because I'm going to give it a shot here. Roses are red. Good start. Sockeyes are red. Poetry's hard. Oh, heck with it. Let's just go fish. No, I'm not a poet. But I do like to tell stories. And I'm going to tell you a couple tonight about the resiliency and the creativeness of fishermen. I got done fishing for after 20 years, and for 3 years I was not on the water, and I got the itch. So I bought a tender. For those of you who don't know what a tender is, you go receive the fish from the fishermen, either out on the grounds, back in the river, or in my case, you have a set net run. Now, set netters fish off the beach. They're not drifters like the boat guys are. And I had 14 sites to go pick up from. And the first, well, there's actually two stories here that involve two different groups of people that were on that run for me. And the first was a couple named Frank and Mildred. Now, Frank and Mildred were in their 70s when I met them. This is in the 90s, so they're long gone now. And Frank was a cantankerous old coot. And wherever he's at now, I'm sure he's telling them what for, and I'm sure Mildred's apologizing for him. So I had heard about Frank, and the first thing I had to do was to go to their winter home and pick them up and everything they own. Now, Frank and Mildred lived in a place called Tutka Bay, which is a small little bay on the south of Homer on the south side of Kachemak Bay. So I got in there with the tender about 2 in the morning, pitch dark, it's about May, a little cold, chill in the air. I told my crew, let's just set the anchor. Frank's not going to see us till daybreak. We'll get some sleep. So no sooner did we set the anchor and I got in the bunk and there was a banging on the hull. Wake up! I go out on deck. There's Frank in his set net skiff, and it's loaded. Fire up that crane and let's get going. I haven't got all night. I thought as a way of introduction, I go, hey, Frank, my name's Don. What are you, blind, deaf monkey? Let's get going. And I mumbled to myself, nice to meet you. So we got that first set net skiff offloaded, and he had 3 more after that. And I swear it was every knick-knack a guy could possibly own his entire life. And in the last load, it included his 2 dogs that looked at me like a pork chop. I kept my eye on them that entire trip. So we get all loaded, and now I've got an 8-hour trip with Frank and Mildred across the inlet to their set net site, which was over on the peninsula, the west side of Cook Inlet. And the entire time, Frank is telling me how to drive a boat, what compass heading to take, how to quarter into the seas. And I'm thinking, this is going to be the longest 8 hours of my entire life. And it was. But it ended. We got Frank there. We got him offloaded. And after that last load, he untied from the tender and motored off without a word. And I just shook my head and I said, I guess the reality matched what I'd heard about this guy. So we took off, went up to the Kenai River. We had to go pick up all these things called scows. Now, a scow is about a 40-foot by 20-foot aluminum barge, essentially, and we had to anchor them in front of every set net site. It was kind of the lifeline between the set netters and me. They'd put their fish, their catch at the end of the day in big nets on top of the barge, but we also would drop off gasoline and propane and groceries and their mail for them that we'd give us orders for when we'd go back to town. So we towed all 14 of these scows out, anchored them off the 14 different sites, and commenced to pick fish up all summer long. Went on until about the middle of August or so when the season ended. Now we had to do the whole thing in reverse. Pick up all the scows, get them back to the river, everybody else back, and now Frank and Mildred back to Tutka Bay. I was looking forward to it. So picked them up, the same thing, 4 skiff loads, and the dogs, who now looked at me like a T-bone. Apparently they lost their taste for pork. And on the way, Mildred comes up to the pilot house. And she starts to tell me a story about something that happened that summer. She said that they were making dinner one night and a big brown bear started pounding at their kitchen window. And I said, what'd you do? Well, she said, Frank grabbed his rifle and he said, Mildred, on the count of 3, open that door and get out of the way. So I did. Opened the door and Frank called the bear. Well, the bear snorts and puffs and comes around to the open door. And Frank lets him have it. Boom, boom, boom. And he drops the bear right there in the doorway. Half inside the cabin and half out. The only way into the cabin. So Frank, being resilient, had no choice but to climb over the bear, go get his ATV and some chains, and chain up the bear and drag it down to the beach. About this time, when Mildred's finishing the story, Frank comes up to the pilot house and he hears the end of it and he looks at me and he goes, damn bear dropped right in the doorway. I didn't plan on that. He said, but you know what? It's not easy to chain up a dead bear, but it's a hell of a lot easier than chaining up a live one. That's Frank and Mildred. This other one I call He Can Fly Okay. And it involves a guy named Jerry who actually fished right next to Frank and Mildred. Now my run, the fishermen would quit fish about 7 at night, and I'd start 30 miles south of where these guys had their sites. So by the time I would get up to where they were, it'd be 2 in the morning or so, middle of the night. And of course, most of the time, these guys are sound asleep in a long, hard day. But once in a while, they'd stay up, and when they'd see my running lights, they'd get on the radio, this to chat, talk about the day. So I'm, about that time, I'm up 2 o'clock, and the radio cracks on, and it's Jerry. He goes, hey, Don, good evening. How are you? And I go, hey, Jerry, I'm good. How was your day? Oh, it wasn't that good. He said, if things better pick up, it's going to be a long winter. Hey, he goes, when you come over to my scow, I got one of my skiffs tied up to the back of it. I wonder if you would tow it back to the river for me. I said, sure, Jerry, no problem. He goes, yeah, there's a little something in it. He said, don't worry about it. I go, well, what's in it? Because I kind of need to know. I'm going to be towing this thing. He goes, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, Jerry. So I pick up at the sites I was at, and now I've got to head across to where Frank and Jerry were. And my deck lights shine on the scow, and I can see the skiff, and in the skiff was an airplane. Now all disassembled airplane and all tied up to the skiff, but it was an airplane. Wings, everything was right there. So I get on the radio, I go, Jerry, is that an airplane in your skiff? I don't want to talk about it. Okay, I tell you what, I'll just get it back. You want me to get the beach gang to haul it out, put it in the yard? He goes, yeah, just have them put it in the yard. I'll deal with it at the end of the year. Okay, so I tow it back. Get to the dock, and little Mike, who ran the beach gang, he lifts the skiff up, and he looks down at me, and he goes, is that Jerry's plane? I said, yeah, he doesn't want to talk about it. So anyway, season goes on, like I said, and finally ends, and now I go pick, this is before I'd take Frank and Mildred back, I pick Jerry up and all the other guys and towing them back to the Kenai River. Well, on the way, Don Johnson, who was the third neighbor of those, Frank and Mildred had one side, Jerry and Don, and all three of them fished there together. Well, Don comes up to the pilot house, and I say, hey, Don, what do you know about Jerry's plane? And Don looks at me, and he looks down the stairway, make sure that Jerry's not listening, and he goes, well, here's what I know. He said, Jerry, on an off day, flew back over to town, and on the way back, he knocked on my door, and he asked if he could borrow some tools. And I thought that was kind of strange, because Jerry has his own tools, but I loaned them to him. And Jerry marched down the beach. Well, about a half hour later, I started thinking, well, that's really strange. I got to go find out what's going on. So I walked down to the beach, and there's Jerry frantically trying to take his plane apart. And I go, Jerry, you need some help? And he goes, yeah, man, I got to get this plane taken apart before the tide comes in. All right, let me help you. So Don says, he said, we took that plane apart, we packed it in his skiff, tied it all up, and he went and tied it off the scow. I went out and picked him up, and I asked him what happened. He goes, I don't want to talk about it. So about that time, when Don's finishing his story, Jerry's wife comes up to the pilot house. Here's the end of the story, and I look at her and I go, what happened? And you know what she said? She goes, Jerry said he can fly a plane okay. He's just not too good at landing. Those are my two stories.
And who do we have here?
My name is Liza McQuaid.
Okay.
Janet Thomas.
And where are you both from?
Portland.
Okay. And I understand this is your first time to the Fisher Poets Gathering.
It is, and you know what? This has been on my bucket list forever, and I just thought this is so great and so interesting that this year we finally made it happen. So,
Well, what do you think?
well, so far so good. We just came into town, so we're just kind of getting our feet under us, but yeah, we're really looking forward to it.
I see you have, I think I might have got a picture of you looking through that, or anything that you've marked off.
All kinds of things look great. We're looking forward to the poetry reading. It starts at 5. So, yeah.
We're kind of in our go with the flow mode, so we're just kind of flowing around, seeing what's happening. We were advised to check out different venues and see what we think.
And menus.
And menus, yes.
So, do you secretly have a thing for fishermen?
Oh, probably.
I have brothers that are fishermen in Hawaii, so I texted them and said I was coming, and they said, oh, sounds like fun. So.
Well, great. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking time. Have a good time.
Yeah,
Bye.
good luck with